stomping the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts.
There we go. All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Sorry, I had a, like Janet Jackson, I had a wardrobe malfunction. Anyway, remember Steve Bannon's infamous quote, "This is not about persuasion. This is about disorientation." So, folks, will Trump's battles with colleges change American culture for a generation or longer? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. So here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they take place in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historic context in which they occur. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they take place, thus enabling you to better analyze and understand the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is, according to the New York Times, many in higher education worry Trump's efforts to bend academia to his will could end American leadership in research and science. Universities are not finding many allies to defend them. My guest is a scholar and activist. He's an expert in the works of W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the most cited Du Bois scholars in the world. He's an organizer with the Philadelphia Saturday Free School. Dr. Anthony Monteiro, as always, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Will. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, according to the New York Times, in 2023, the then president of Columbia University, Dr. Nemat Safiq, argued that the world required much. Rigorous thinkers who were grounded in the age's great debates, researchers whose breakthroughs could transform societies, universities that extended their missions far beyond their gates. Tony Trump is at the tip. It appears as though Trump is at the tip of the spear of those attacking free speech, thought, and intellectualism. Dr. Monteiro.
Yes, and I like the way you said that what you do is to establish a context for discussion and debate. And I think in times like this, perhaps the most important questions have to do with context, because there are partisans on every side of these issues. First of all, the American universities have gone through, at least in the last 80 years, I think at least two major changes of context or paradigm or of mission, their missions. The first is when the American universities became central players and in some ways think tanks for the American Cold War against the Soviet Union. So already they were not unbiased centers of free speech. If you recall, during the period of McCarthyism, which lasted pretty much up till the early 1970s and only changed as a result of the student movements, the civil rights and anti-war movements, the women's movements. But the universities, we should be clear, were not friendly to the protest movements, were not centers of liberal and progressive, even radical or revolutionary thought. In fact, the progressives and radicals and revolutionaries had been driven out of the universities under the mandates of the Cold War. The second shift came with the 1990s, essentially, and the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the universities were enlisted and willingly became a part of the U.S. Ruling elites' mission to uphold a unipolar world and American hegemony. The universities, without a really robust student movement like the 60s and 70s, the universities became willing partners in the war agenda of American empire. They had already, throughout the throughout the Cold War, been linked to the military-industrial complex, the sciences such as physics and chemistry and biology were enlisted in the project of weapons of mass destruction, weapons of human genocide. But then, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, a larger, more sophisticated agenda became the mission of the universities. They were no longer as open as they were in the 60s and 70s, kind of going forward, because of the student movements, the movements of progressive professors, and the pressures from the broad public in the United States, that universities, in fact, become centers of speech and free speech. Well, since the end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the US becoming the single superpower, the single hegemon, with the rise of neoliberal globalism and the power of the neocons or war makers, the universities shifted to a wider ideological mission to subdue ideologically the American people and essentially to rewrite the history of the universities. They became thus centers of identity politics and what we call postmodernist theories. Increasingly, the universities separated themselves from ordinary people, from the interest of ordinary people, and became centers of elite discourse and the development of elite consensus to support, again, the idea of the United States as the indispensable nation, the single hegemon. Therefore, bringing it up till today, what I would say is that the universities are part of and in the crosshairs of this battle that Trump said he would wage against elites, especially elites who had targeted him in his first term and throughout the period leading up to his reelection. So this is the way I would see it. Now, do I support what Trump and his movement are doing in the universities? Well, first of all, the attack upon student protesters in the interest of the Zionists and the state of Israel, I oppose completely. However, I think there's a case to be made that elite universities, and this does not mean all universities, the elite of the elite have to be put in their places, have to be challenged on their agenda. They do not come to the table of politics unbiased and only interested in democracy and freedom. In fact, as I've tried to point out, the universities, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union and then all of these wars of regime change and nation building in the Middle East in particular, these wars and of course the state of Israel have shaped what the universities are. And for example, and I don't want to talk too long, Will, you could
no, man. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, bro.
Unless you consider the theories having to do with postmodernism, the idea that there's no such thing as truth, the idea that elites count more than ordinary people, or the idea that working people and the working class deserve whatever they get, and that, again, the universities are the preserve of elites. I do not consider postmodernism or, as they call it, critical race theory or queer theory to be advances in knowledge, or for that matter, to be even progressive. Most professors in Black studies, in queer studies, in women's studies, and other ethnic studies go along to get along and put themselves and their tenure ahead of peace, the struggle for real democracy, or the struggle for the working people.
Let me go back to some of what you were just talking about the Cold War, and frame it a slightly different way and see if this holds water.
Okay.
The United States, and I look at this from the free speech perspective, and some of the things that we discussed when I was in law school, and that is when we look at free speech, and I'll equate free speech to the college campus. That when the United States finds itself in conflict or finds itself threatened, it clamps down on free speech. It becomes incredibly reactive. So during World War II, the threat, and during the McCarthy era, the threat of communism and the Red March and all of that stuff, the United States felt threatened. The United States was afraid. And so it clamps down. It becomes very resistant. It starts charging people with subversion and these types of things. And then after the threat is vanquished, once the United States starts to feel more comfortable in its power, post the collapse, the collapse of the post Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, now the United States does not feel that threat and becomes a little more tolerant of speech that it otherwise would clamp down on. And so now we are reverting back to that same mindset, because we're shifting from the unipolar to the multipolar construct. And the United States, the elite now realize that the empire is on the wane. And so we now find ourselves once again under attack by the same forces that always react to these types of threats.
Well, I think I would differ a bit
Okay.
with your periodization of things. I think that that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and especially after 9/11 and the institution of the Patriot Act and other repressive legislation, the universities became a major stalwart of the ruling elites.
Correct.
We have to be clear. Freedom of speech only counts in these universities and these elite universities when it supports the agenda of American empire. There is no freedom of speech other than that. I was a university professor for some time, and I know that, for example, people would talk about Black studies and Africana studies and so on, but people like Paul Robeson and W.E.B. Du Bois were erased by Black professors using different excuses. That Du Bois, for example, was not African enough. If you're an Afrocentrist, that Du Bois was a misogynist. If you're in women's studies, and on and on and on. The same with Robeson. And everything that they could find to be wrong with the Black struggle, they found it and exaggerated it and made careers off of it. Whose interest did it serve? It served the interest of empire. So I think, now this is just my assessment, I think the universities are more reactionary now than they were at the time of McCarthyism.
I agree with you 1,000%.
Yeah, there were remnants of progressives and radicals and socialists and communists left over from the days of the New Deal, But by the time of the 1990s and 2000s, most progressive radical professors had been eliminated. The other thing is, take African American studies, which grew out of a joint struggle of the community and the and students at various universities. Well, by the 2000s, the community is not even recognized as a concern for research or scholarship. So African American studies, what we call African American studies, is a site of careerism, of professors trying to get ahead, and has very little to do with the struggle of Black people, as though we were completely free. So I think the elite universities are biased towards elites. And when I say elites, I'm talking about the ruling class of the United States. And because of that, elite universities and their professors, their leading professors, have occupied a privileged position. And in this respect, in this elite contest or contest with elites, for example, the Trump people will argue that we were elected democratically. We represent the democratic will of the people. Universities and their administrations and most of their professors are elites who have contempt for democracy and the democratic will of the people. Hence, this clash of what we could call a populist right against a more liberal, neoliberal elite is what we are saying, or what we are seeing. And it's not, in my mind, a struggle for freedom of speech, because the universities, especially elite ones, had abandoned freedom of speech decades ago.
In this New York Times piece continues, the outcome of this clash over the purpose of higher education stands to shape American culture for a generation or more. If the president realizes his ambitions, many American universities, public and private, in conservative states and liberal ones, could be hollowed out, imperiling the backbone of the nation's research endeavors. one of the things that jumped out to me in this paragraph is if the president realizes his ambitions. That's why earlier I said, is Donald Trump the tip of the spear? Because I think trying to put this on him as though this is his mission, folks are, if you're shooting at ghosts, if you're trying to put this on him, because I don't think that he has the intellectual horsepower to have to fight the battle on this level.
Yeah, I would agree with you. This is bigger than him, and it represents something deeper in the U.S. Political system at this time. Remember, most of the major institutions of the United States face profound crises of legitimacy. When it comes to the masses of people, most universities do not have a lot of legitimacy. People don't trust them. People don't think that they have fulfilled a mission of democracy or liberty or progress at all, or that they care anything about ordinary people. So when the New York Times talks about the elite universities in these romantic terms, that's, I think, fictional. I don't know that the universities, since the beginning of the Cold War up till now, have ever been these unbiased institutions of democracy and free speech. They have not been that. That is what I think those of us like yourself and others, myself, who consider ourselves progressives, our mission is not to fall in line with the Trump agenda, but to, at this time of crisis, put forward our own agenda of what the universities should be. I have some ideas about that, and I think it's a fight that we must have. And I think the fight over the character, the essence and substance of pedagogy and learning at universities must go hand in hand with a radical redo, a radical remake of most of the major institutions in American society. And in this regards, we're talking about a multi-decade struggle to democratically remake this nation and its institutions, and to, as Martin Luther King said, turn this society into one that doesn't want to study war anymore. And once we solve these fundamental ideological questions, I think we can understand, as you put it, the context in which we are operating.
You talked about the Cold War.
Yes.
In simplistic terms, democracy versus communism.
Right.
So are we now looking at empire or imperial? Is the fight now imperialism versus anti-imperialism? As we look at the battle, the ongoing battle between the United States and Russia, when we look at the rise of the BRICS nations, are we looking at this is it too simplistic to put it in the context of the empire versus anti-imperialism? When we look at what's happening in occupied Palestine, we're looking at a fight of white supremacist settler colonialism, imperialism versus anti-imperialism. Is it too simplistic to put it in those contexts?
No, I think that's fair to put it that way. I think it helps to explain a lot of things. And the question, if you put it that way, empire versus a multipolar world, imperialism versus anti-imperialism, democracy versus war and fascism. I think you're right. We can think in these binary terms, and thereby allowing ourselves to make a judgment on the universities, the elite universities. What side of these questions are the universities on? And then, of course, we saw a spectacle last spring as the student protest at elite universities gathered steam, where rich and powerful Zionists on the boards of these various elite universities forced the resignation of presidents of these universities over the question of were they too liberal in allowing student demonstrations. And, the big donors had the final say. And I think that tells us a lot about what these universities are about. So, no, I think you lay out a context that we can work within and work from in understanding these universities and what they actually do and how they actually function.
It is really, I'll say, amazing to me, but not surprising.
Mm-hmm.
As we look at the reaction to the protests regarding occupied Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be through the academic side, through the university side, whether it be from the political side, as Kamala Harris, as a Democrat, tried to sell us genocide. And how do you sell me genocide? How when I was engaged, or when we were engaged in that part of the debate back in October and November before the election, and folks were trying to tell me that Kamala Harris would be, and people are still trying to say that, if Kamala Harris had been elected, we wouldn't be where we are now. And I say, well, yeah, that's true. We'd be in a different place and still be as effed up. It would just be a different issue. We'd be looking at nuclear war, for example. So, how do you say, well, yeah, she's selling genocide. Yeah, but I don't get that. I don't even know if that's a question.
Well, part of the reason she lost, and part of the reason for lack of enthusiasm among what should have been her most passionate base, Black people, was that they were trying to sell us what we, the people, were not willing to buy. Now, but Trump ran as a candidate of peace and seems to want to be a candidate of war, at least in Western Asia. Maybe he's made strides towards peace in Ukraine and establishing more normal relations with Russia and bringing us back from the brink of world war and perhaps thermonuclear war with Russia. That's to his credit. When it comes to Western Asia, he has nothing, and we have nothing to celebrate. He must be condemned. However, when you talk about the universities and other elite institutions in this society, Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, or for that matter, the whole Democratic Party, are representatives and operate from within the most elite institutions of the society, including universities, including the financial system, including most of the institutions of foreign policy and domestic policy. And that's why I think what we're looking at is, and how to define Trump, this is a very difficult thing to do, but a more or less populist movement trying to bring these elite institutions down. and to remake them. I would say that for myself, I also want the elite institutions brought down, and I too want them remade, and I want a new democracy, a people's democracy, to emerge in this society. That means that for people like myself, it is a complex and difficult struggle ahead. This will not be easy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right about Trump. How much he realizes what is going on, or what the full dimensions of the struggle with the universities are, I don't know. One thing is for certain, though, that his administration is kind of configured as attack dogs against the elite and their institutions.
Zhao Yun says, if Kamala Harris was elected, there would still be no nuclear war. Well, Zhao, you don't know that. And this is what we do know, that Joe Biden was hell-bent on escalating the conflict with Russia. We know that. That's very clear. You can't debate that point. We know that Russian President Putin understood very clearly that the Biden administration was hell-bent on escalating the conflict to the point to where Vladimir Putin changed the nuclear doctrine within his country so that he could be more responsive using nuclear weapons if it came to that. And when Kamala Harris was asked what were the differences between her policies and Biden's policies, her answer was, there's no difference. So it's not a stretch. It's not a stretch. Tony, am I tripping?
No. The only thing I would say is that is a debate and a discussion,
sure,
of a previous time.
Right.
I think what is before us now, we have to face, and that is, yes, movement towards a peaceful settlement in Ukraine, a more normal set of relations with Russia, which means less of a chance of a nuclear war. I think that Trump has not pursued nuclear brinksmanship the way the Biden administration has. But that does not solve all the questions, because you still got Western Asia.
Oh, absolutely.
And
that's his focus.
And that's part of his focus, as is China, yes.
Right.
But domestically, and this does not explain the geostrategic questions do not explain what is going on domestically.
Oh, gotcha.
And this, I think, is far more complicated. The domestic struggle and its geography, and the consequences of the 2024 election. We can say, I think, that election revealed a political realignment, maybe the second major political realignment in the last 100 years. The first being the realignment coming about with the election of Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the New Deal. This 2024 election is a realignment. In particular, the majority of the working class moved from the Democratic Party to the Trump movement. He won the majority of young people and the majority of women, and a growing part of the African American community, and I believe almost the majority of the Latino community. this is a political realignment. Republicans could not boast of anything quite like this, maybe since Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
So the Democratic Party became the party of elites, of neoliberalism, and even of war. And the Republicans, or better stated, the Trump movement, challenged that. So we've experienced a political realignment. Has this meant that we're out of the woods, that democracy is prepared to flourish in our country, or that we're about to see the institution of a peace budget, that we're moving from a warfare state to a peaceful nation where the needs of ordinary people come first? No, that is going to take a tremendous struggle. To what extent the Trump movement is on the side of the people in all of these issues is yet to be decided. But the people must move forward with or without the MAGA movement. And if Trump continues to pursue war policies as he is doing, I think even his movement will fracture. And those who want a more progressive agenda will abandon him for obvious reasons.
Trump said colleges have gotten hundreds of billions of dollars from hardworking taxpayers, and now we're going to get this anti-American insanity out of our institutions once and for all. We're going to have real education in America. The goal is to reclaim our once great educational institutions from the radical left. Your thoughts on this language, and what does the power of this language and the way he frames the argument?
Yeah, well, Trump always gives you language which says a lot about him. This is a guy who wants to walk into the future looking backward. This language betrays a certain fear of the future that he has. The universities that he's talking about, he never saw them. He went to University of Pennsylvania Wharton School. What was so great about that?
And went undergrad, didn't go to the Wharton Graduate Business School.
I didn't know that.
No, yeah. I don't think he went to the Wharton Graduate Business School. I think he went undergrad.
Okay, cool. Whatever. But like Du Bois once said that he was at Harvard, he was not of Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump was at the Wharton School, and he was of the Wharton School. How do we talk about a person like him? How do we think about such a person? This opinion writer for the New York Times, quite impressive man by the name of Ross Douthat, wrote an article, an opinion piece after Trump was shot in Butler, Pennsylvania. And he said that Trump is like Hegel's man of destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And I responded to that, and I said, well, Hegel always understood that history comes in twos, first as tragedy, then as farce. And we're talking about historical tragedy and historical farce. Trump looks more like farce. He wants to be something and does not know what he really wants to be, or better yet, he wants to walk into the future backward. But the people of this country, I sense, Wilmer, cannot wait. The people who voted for him, who didn't vote, who will never vote for him, they want change. Now, they want the country reindustrialized. They feel that this 35 or so years of de-industrialization and neoliberal globalism has operated against working people, and they're right about that.
Mm-hmm.
Has left the country more unequal than before, and have given a privileged position to elites and elite discourse and elite opinions, not listening to or hearing ordinary people. For this reason, the head of the UAW, who is no friend of Donald Trump's, and during the campaign referred to him as a scab and other things, is now supporting Trump's tariffs to bring automobile production back to the United States. I don't think we'll ever get it all back like it was,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly it is a recognition by this political enemy of Trump's, that the Democratic Party, the party that the labor movement had been supporting for decades, had sold the American worker out with this neoliberal globalization and the attendant policies of deindustrialization. The country is poorer. The working class is more decimated. And for most people, the landscape is a dark and tragic one. So if you look at all of these variables in the domestic, political and economic and social reality, if you look at it from the standpoint of the working class, I don't think there's anything to mourn about attacks upon elite universities. But there's an opportunity in a crisis of this magnitude to make some real changes. And these universities have to be changed. Just another quick thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about elite universities, you're talking about these big corporations with $100 billion endowments. And they're corporations, and they're also gentrifiers. They, here in Philadelphia, the University of Pennsylvania is more an enemy of the poor and working people than it is their friend. Now, they can talk about free speech all they want to, but how do they explain their gentrification of a big part of Black Philadelphia, moving people out, making rents unaffordable? I think these universities have this brand, this fiction, that they are something that they are not, and they have not been for almost 80 years.
Let me thank Raven Allen for two $5 super stickers. And she says everyone should be reading and dissecting right now 1984 by George Orwell, because this is exactly where we are right now. Kevin Baptiste, thank you for your $10. Pauline Douglas, thank you very much for your $5 sticker. Greatly appreciate that. And Tony, you made reference in a couple of instances now to the class struggle. And when you and I were talking yesterday about what we were going to talk about today, one of the things that you mentioned was Lennon's "What is to be done," and you also wanted to put this conversation in the context of Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On." So let me now, having brought that to the forefront, let me throw it to you and let you put it in the context that you wanted to put this in.
Well, in talking to you, you asked, well, what are we going to talk about? And I said, well, I'd like to talk about Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On." alongside of Lennon's What Is to Be Done. Maybe that's the only time in political theory where Marvin Gaye and Lennon have been spoken of together. But I think there's something here. We're not yet certain what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I would challenge those people who act like they do know. This is a very fluid moment. It is a moment filled with contradictions. Again, I think you know me good enough to know that I try to begin analysis, and that's because I'm a sociologist, from the standpoint of people,
Mm-hmm.
classes, social groups. That's the kind of sociology I do. The people have said in poll after poll, credible poll after poll, 75% of them say the government does not care about people like them.
Mm-hmm.
Other polls, and these are kind of what they call A or A+ polls, have shown that people, 70% of them, said that the government must be fundamentally reformed. 15% of them say that the whole government has to be overturned and something new built. There are other polls that show, for example, that the Congress, the People's House, the House of Representatives, has something either in the low 20s or below 20% approval,
Mm-hmm.
meaning 70-80% do not approve of the job they're doing. And you take universities, you take the medical profession, any major institution, churches, people feel that these are not institutions that represent them. Well, you have to ask the question. You have the people elected an administration headed by Trump. Trump often and most times speaks out of both sides of his mouth. What is he saying and what does he mean? And why do we, the people, always have to figure this out? He should be clear, but he is not.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take the elites, including Trump, including most of his administration, the MAGA movement, and so on, they have no way to address this crisis of legitimacy, which then raises the question, what is to be done in a situation where the people and the political elites are so separated that a good part of the people say the whole government needs to be overturned and something new built? Well, when Lennon wrote his famous essay, What Is to Be Done, he argued that in a crisis like the one they were facing in Russia, not unlike what we're facing here, one of the options was a revolutionary struggle, and that the people must seize the reins of power. Whether that is what is on the agenda here or not is difficult to say. But certainly, I don't think the people are prepared to go back to anything. They are looking to go forward. Yeah, people say, well, what do you mean, the people? White people, black people? No, I'm talking about a critical mass who, in polling data, demonstrate a discontent with the system as it currently exists. Now, I guess you heard me say this before. This could be a pre-revolutionary situation. Will it be a violent revolution? I don't necessarily think so.
Mm-hmm.
Could it be a revolution emerging from activism of a determined type, such as mass civil disobedience, making it difficult, for example, for the city government in Philadelphia to function unless it addresses the needs of the people? I would say that for Chicago and maybe for Washington, D.C. But that's the way. Or, we could just lapse into a civil war. where the country becomes ungovernable completely. So we're at that kind of a moment. I am not a partisan of liberal and Democratic Party elites' panic and framing of things. I don't see the world that way. Yeah, that's
a couple of things. One, so you've got these town halls that are taking place or that were taking place, and primarily Republicans, MAGA folks, storming these town halls, screaming at their representatives, "What are you doing? You're not doing your job." To so much so that Mike Johnson, the speaker, told them, "Y'all need to stop this because y'all need to stop having these town halls because these aren't the optics that are favorable to us." And the chant that came out of these town halls was, "We didn't vote for this." And to me, what that translates into is, you weren't supposed to do this to me. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. You told me about Mexicans coming across the border. You told me Mexicans were taking my job. You told me immigrants, and now my daughter's losing her job. My wife, I can't get my veterans benefits. You weren't supposed to do this to me. And so now then, as a result of that, you have Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, who says, when Mike Johnson says, oh, we can ignore those people, they're paid protesters. And Hakeem Jeffries says, oh, we don't have to pay protesters, the people are with us. But when you look at the polling data, Hakeem, no, they're not. Only 27. The Democratic Party is at the lowest point in its favorability rating since 1990. Hakeem Jeffries, when you turn around and look at who are standing behind you, you're standing by yourself, dude. You need to understand that. Final point. You mentioned Lennon saying that the debate was how the revolution was going to play out. I thought in What Is to Be Done that his point was, the economists are arguing that we should work within the framework, that we should not have a revolution, that we should have what's what I'm looking for? Reform. And that he was saying that that it shouldn't be reform, that it should actually be revolution. And the way Tom Porter explained it to me was, leadership now is trying to operate within the mousetrap, when actually we should be figuring out how to destroy the mousetrap and operate from that context. Tony.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. We need a whole different paradigm of politics, of left-wing and progressive politics. And that's why I think the way Lennon framed it back in his time is valuable for us.
Mm-hmm.
You raised the question of leadership. When all of the so-called civil rights leaders have become a part of and paid operatives of the Democratic Party,
mm-hmm.
We can't call them civil rights leaders anymore. We have to call them Democratic Party operatives.
And AIPAC.
Yes, and AIPAC. Yeah. So whose interests do they operate in?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously not the Black community, and Black people recognize that. These polls are so disturbing, or should be so disturbing, for the ruling elite in both parties, that some of them should be jumping out of windows right now. it is just that bad. We have never seen these types of political attitudes. The majority of people are not in either party. They see themselves as independent or not a part of any political process. I mean, this, at any other time, we would call this a revolutionary situation. I think it is something close to that. And Trump is not the decider of what the people ultimately do. And it was they who made him, not him who made them. And they can undo him. There's some reason to believe that his presidency could be undone in his first 100 days. That's not out of the question.
Correct.
Unless he can more cogently and actually address the needs of the people, and not just people who voted for him. I'm talking about the people, period. Those who voted against him, those who will never vote for him, as well as those who voted for him. Now, if he attacks elite universities, ordinary people are not going to come to the defense of elite universities.
But mess with Social Security and veterans benefits.
Well, you touch that, now you're in different territory.
Now you're smoking at the gas station.
Yeah, right. That's right. You're smoking or smoking something you shouldn't be smoking.
At the gas station.
At the gas station.
Can you give me about 10 more minutes?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Go finish your thought.
No, I think the way I look at these matters, I've kind of established it. I don't, whatever the New York Times says about universities and elite universities, well, that's one part of the elite defending another part. I've never associated the New York Times with a lot of free speech or commitment to free speech. So when they are so-called defending free speech at elite universities, the question I have, well, who are you to talk about free speech? I mean, you didn't think Robeson had it, or Du Bois had it, and pretty much King had it as he took on the war in Vietnam. So I didn't see the New York Times coming out strongly against the Patriot Act and all of those repressive laws and so on. So I don't think the ruling elite have any thing to stand upon when they talk about free speech. I think the struggle with the universities is not about free speech, but it is about an attack upon elites and elite institutions. And that always has, and really now carries a lot of weight with millions of ordinary American citizens.
I asked you for an additional 10 minutes because I wanted to get your take on what we've been hearing and what we've been seeing from Bernie the sheepdog Sanders and AOC. Yeah, because he's the sheepdog. He's the sheepdog for the Democrats. He's the bell cow. He's been on his anti-oligarchy tour.
Right.
And he's right. And on that point, I gotta give Bernie the sheepdog all credit. But he's not talking about kleptocrats, because when you look at Elon Musk, you look at Donald Trump selling Teslas on the lawn of the White House. What? Well, so Bernie, and I think he needs to be using that language because people need to understand what this language is. But I bring this up to say, Bernie, you're right, and AOC, you're right about that. You're right about the oligarchy tour, but we've seen this from y'all before. Bernie, you get out way out and ahead of your skis, and then the Democrats come like a big gust of wind and blow you off the mountain.
Yeah.
Like I know you remember the wide rule of sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat when the guy falls off the ski jump. And then the other thing that I really find very telling about all of this is, once again, Bernie's out there by himself. That he's not articulating a message from the party, which tells me they're listening to whoever the new DNC chairman is, don't even know where this guy come from, and Hakeem Jeffries. They're saying, as that brilliant African-American philosopher James Brown said, you're talking loud and saying nothing.
Yeah.
Tony.
Yeah, well, true. I mean, Bernie, he's almost a spent force, an exhausted force.
A caricature of himself.
I would put it that way. And at one time, he captured the imagination and the commitments and support of young people. Young people have abandoned him. And in the 2020 and 2024 elections, I don't think Bernie brought anything significant into the Democratic Party coalition. He couldn't help them win then, and maybe he garners some support and generates some excitement from a part of the American people, because they are upset and people are looking for someone to provide some answers. But sadly, Bernie is not going to be able to carry through. I guess that's why he has AOC with him, literally saying Bernie is the past and AOC is the anointed future. We saw how this anointment worked out with Kamala Harris. And of course, the Democratic Party itself is a total mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I that's the way I would look at him.
Well, they're operating as the minority party instead of operating as the opposition. That's
a very interesting point, and they haven't figured out how to be either of those things. If you were to say anything, they are a defeated force, and they act like it.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of in a circular firing squad where in the not too distant future, those who oppose Bernie and AOC are going to start attacking them for their own selfish political interests. And need we talk about the Black Congressional Caucus?
The who?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them. I remember them. Them. Yeah.
Who were going to represent us. You remember back in the day?
I remember them. Oh, the conscience of the Congress.
Yeah.
Who's now unconscious.
Yeah.
I remember them.
The war they don't support,
I remember them. Yeah.
So I guess I'm back to what I was saying some time ago. The people have abandoned the politicians of this nation. And you can't talk about, as Bernie and AOC, we're going to speak to the working class. What about the last 30 years when the working class didn't count to you? It's so something new will emerge, I think. And that's why, again, what is to be done? Is it to reform a system that seems to be beyond reform, or is it to create something new? Will we have a democracy for the elites, or will we have a people's democracy? Will we be able to go forward without peace and democracy, without a peace budget? And of course, the contradictions are so intense far more than any other time. Again, I've mentioned this $37 trillion sovereign debt, with the prospect that in the next 5 or 10 years it will increase by 23 trillion. It can't be paid off. It's just too much. A big part of it will have to be canceled. And a big part of what made this debt, that is the price and cost of empire, makes a retreat from empire, a rejection of empire, a rejection of the single hegemon and all of that stuff necessary if the nation is to survive. I mean, literally to prevent a civil war or, in fact, a very difficult, maybe bloody revolutionary struggle. I mean, it looks like that to me.
I think that's a great place to put the period at the end of the term paper and turn that rascal in. Okay. Dr. Anthony Monteiro, my brother, thank you so much for your time, always for your insight and your wisdom. And really quickly, Cherie asked the question, who was the better dancer, James Brown or Michael Jackson? Y'all ever heard of Sammy Davis Jr.? And let's move the conversation from there. No contest when Sammy came on the stage. Anyway, my brother, thank you.
I think I would vote for James Brown, but that's just me.
Tony, thank you. I greatly appreciate it, man. Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Dr. Estreet is the CEO of the National American Social Workers Association, is going to join us tomorrow, and we're going to talk about the impact that the current circumstance is having on the African American community. Stay tuned for that tomorrow. Please follow and subscribe. Remember, we're here for you, but can't do this without you. And leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. We need you to subscribe. To go to YouTube and click the subscribe button. Please, baby, please, baby, please. You can find all the links below in the show description. Remember, folks, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a blessed remainder of your day, and this is the best day of the year. Why? Because it's opening day for baseball. Have a great one. Peace.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.